Here we are back together again, friends, for another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Erica Forsyth is back today for our 5th installment of the Caregiver Burnout series. If you've missed episodes 1, 2, 3, and 4 of this series, go back and get them. If you're interested in learning more about Erica, you can find her at ericaforsyth.com. If you're enjoying the podcast, please follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And don't forget to share this with a friend who you think might also enjoy it. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. Don't forget to save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com. All you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. If you or a loved one was just diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and you're looking for some fresh perspective, the Bold Beginnings series from the Juicebox Podcast is a terrific place to start. That series is with myself and Jenny Smith. Jenny is a CDCES, a registered dietitian, and a type 1 for over 35 years. And in the Bold Beginnings series, Jenny and I are going to answer the questions that most people have after a type 1 diabetes diagnosis. Today's episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. This is the meter that my daughter has on her person right now. It is incredibly accurate and waiting for you at contournext.com/juicebox. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes. And later in this episode, we're going to be speaking with Heather, who will talk about the importance of education and understanding the impacts of hyperglycemia. MedtronicDiabetes.com/hyper. Erica, here we are for episode 5 of our Caregiver Burden series. What's today's topic?
That's right. Today's topic is navigating social experiences post-diagnosis.
This is the part where I read the quote?
Yes, this is your part.
There's just so much to do for our infant. The management consumes our lives. There is no time to socialize, no time even for each other. That's sad.
Yes.
Yeah.
So obviously, navigating social experiences post-diagnosis is going to look and feel different depending on the age and stage of your child's diagnosis. But for the most part, you're in a season of shock and grieving and adjustment. So there is this natural struggle and concern of, okay, how do we navigate social gatherings, and that, whether it's parties, whether it's office talk, community events, whatever. When we're talking about social gatherings, really any kind of social interaction. Mm-hmm. The research says, that many parents struggle with attending these gatherings, being social, due to the disruptiveness and seriousness of type 1. A lot of the research also said in the beginning, it's really hard. If you're at a party, for example, and you're trying to talk with friends, but then you're worried about, you're looking at the CGM, or you're worried about, is my child going low? Do we have to go treat? The tension is kind of a twofold situation. Obviously, you're concerned for your child's health, mm-hmm. but also you're kind of holding this, what is this other person going to think about, or how are they going to think of me when I'm kind of half here, I'm kind of half listening, but I'm like, and I'm looking at my phone, or or excuse me. And so that is another burden to carry, how to manage those interactions and the conversations.
Yeah, like when you're driving the car, the passenger doesn't judge you for not turning and looking at them while you're talking, right? They know you're focusing on another thing and they can tell it's important. But around the diabetes, especially in a world where a lot of people hear from people like, well, yeah, but you've got it under control now. She looks good. They don't understand mm-hmm. what it is you're burdened with and thinking about. And then you get judged for not being present.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So not only do you have to feel shame for not being present during a birthday party or a gathering or something like that, but you've got to sit there and wonder when you're going to get shamed in return for not acting the way you're supposed to act in that situation.
Yes.
Oh, great.
Yes. The car example is a really good one, because in that there's the expectation and there's norms, right? But part of this burden of navigating these social interactions is the other, meaning the other person you're talking to, doesn't have those, those norms set in place.
Right.
And we're going to kind of flesh that out.
Well, especially because when you start explaining it, you sound kooky. I've always found that through my life. Like whenever you start telling people about diabetes, they look at you like, are you out of your mind? And then when you stop and think about it later, you go, oh, I do sound like I'm out of my mind. And by the way, I might be a little bit. Like I'm panicked that this is going to go wrong, or that they're going to grab a cupcake and I'm not going to know about it, or he's going to go, like, the kids are all going to go run down the street and she's going to get low while she's like, oh my God. Yeah.
Yes. And you're setting us up really well for when we get to the tools conversation.
Okay. All right.
Like how do we respond to those moments? And then let's say you kind of get past that point of, I don't know how to do these social interactions. And you get to the point of, well, maybe we want to, I want to go out with my partner, or maybe I want to go take a yoga class, or whatever it is. Even if when you have that longing to have that social connection, you might also experience the challenge of either finding reliable care, whether it's family or professional, finding it and then trusting that care, right? Yeah. So that's like the second hurdle to get through, which we're going to talk about also.
Because it's going to feel like nobody can do it, right?
That's right.
Yeah, mostly you're going to be like, well, I'll look for, and maybe you get lucky and find like a type 1 kid. I mean, you know what I mean? And you're like, okay, well, you have it, so that's good. Or another parent. I've seen that before. I've seen parents, buddy up. This is going to be in the tools part, isn't it? I'm sorry.
It is. No, you're good. You're good.
But I always get worried about hitting the wall and giving up. Actually, in all of this, like as you go through, like, at what point do you just say, I don't want to stand there and be judged. I'm not going to go. Or I don't want to deal with the food. I'm not going to go. I'm never going to find a babysitter. We'll just stay here. And then before you know it, you haven't left your house in 5 years,
Yes, that is exactly what happens. So all of this leads you to staying at home.
Yeah, I've lived through this, Erica. I'm aware of how it's going to go.
Yeah. Oh gosh. And I know, we giggle, but this is so painful and challenging, right? That's why we're highlighting this.
It changes the course of your life.
Yes.
It really does. There's a big difference between getting married and sitting around having sex and eating frozen pizza and not being able to leave the house because of all these things. You know what I mean? Like everyone goes through a season in their life, Erica, to quote you from another episode, where like hanging out kind of alone and at home, like you're building your family. I don't know if people realize that happens or not, but you hunker down at some point, right? But then you go back out again. But this is one of those where you could hunker down for the wrong reasons and just become isolated.
Yes. Yes. So because it becomes so painful to have to deal with those conversations or the questions like, oh, it looks like things are well. Like how's your child adjusted? How have you adjusted? Like, look, he's on the soccer team. Good for you. And people obviously don't know because they don't know how hard you're working to make it look so easy.
Yeah. I'm thinking of shooting up a bank, Becky. Thanks for asking. Yeah.
Yes.
Not that, right.
Yes. Yeah. So what can we do? So these tools are going to kind of be a random mixture of kind of filling your toolbox with actual tangible tools and some kind of cognitive tools. So again, we're leading with, noticing the why, noticing the chatter that's going on in your mind. I know a lot of parents, when they start to go out, whether it's on a trip or to the beach, they might think, must be nice when you're looking at other families, like must be nice to go to the beach and not have 50, fruit snacks and 20 juice boxes and a bag full of device changes. Like must be nice, or it must be nice to go on a trip and not have to worry about going through the x-ray, et cetera, right?
Yeah, I haven't driven away from my house more than an hour without ice with me in quite some time. And you know what I mean? Just that little thing, like, oh, I don't want to drive too far away because we'll take insulin with us, and we keep our insulin refrigerated. So we'll throw it on some ice, and the next thing you know, you have a little cooler, and you're like, I don't think about it anymore, to be perfectly honest. But for many years, as you're doing it, you're just under your breath. You're like, I can't believe this is what I got to do to go to the mall. You know what I mean? So I hear you. Yes. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the must be nice. So in the beginning, that obviously, or in, again, periods or seasons of change, that is either, resentment or bitterness, but underneath that is the grief, right? Of like, I can't, like, this is hard. This is sad. Why do I have to do this for my child? Why can't we just go off as a family without thinking about all these things? Why can't we go camping again? Whatever it is that your family used to do, and you're noticing that must be nice. And so to honor that, like, it's hard. Offer yourself that compassion that you were on that journey of acceptance. It's okay to have those thoughts, and it's normal. And being kind to yourself is so important in that space.
This episode is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes. Learn more about hyperglycemia at medtronicdiabetes.com/hyper.
Well, hi, I'm Heather Lackey. I am a wife and mom. I have 2 children that are seniors in high school, and I've had type 1 diabetes for 34 years. And I'm a dietitian and a diabetes educator. I'm the director of global medical education. I lead a team of clinicians that are developing content.
How do you feel when your blood sugar's high?
Irritable, thirsty, hungry.
What do you enjoy most about your job?
See education working, see people thriving. That's kind of the fuel that feeds, my fire.
What would you like to see community members talk about more?
Hyperglycemia is the critical thing, right? That leads to short-term and long-term complications. Hyperglycemia is the greatest unmet need in the treatment of diabetes currently. And I think that that's where technology can help.
If you're having trouble with hyperglycemia and would like to talk to other people in the diabetes community, check out the Medtronic Champions hashtag or go to medtronicdiabetes.com/hyper. Far too often, we accept the blood glucose meter that someone hands to us. The doctor reaches into a drawer and goes, "Here, take this one." Is that the one you want? Is it accurate? You have no way of knowing. But if you want accuracy and you want to be confident in the blood glucose readings that you're getting from your meter, you want the Contour NextGen. It's incredibly easy to get the same meter that Arden uses. Just go to contournext.com/juicebox. That's all you have to do. The Contour NextGen is easy to use and highly accurate. It features a smart light that provides a simple understanding of your blood glucose levels. And of course, second chance sampling technology that can help you to save money with fewer wasted strips. contournext.com/juicebox. And I do think you can get through it as
yes.
well. Yeah. I mean, genuinely, I've had those thoughts, but I don't have them anymore. Like, I don't even think twice about it. I could just, I could probably do it with my eyes closed, grab the insulin, grab the ice, do the thing. But I have a little cup I use. It takes 30 seconds now. And you don't think about it. Even just like pump changes used to feel like that. You know what I mean? Like, you just like, oh, it's going to happen. And then it happens. And I got to go get the thing and I got to open it up. And the whole time you're just grinding your gears that you have to do it. And then one day for me, I just didn't think about it ever again. I was like, oh, I guess it's just what happens. It's like brushing your teeth kind of feeling,
Sometimes. So that's a nice moment when it feels like brushing our teeth. But even 34 years in, I still am like, dang, I got to change my pump today.
Yeah. No, I imagine you actually were very helpful for me because I mentioned how Arden will take a pump down to like the last unit. You know what I mean? Like, it'll be 11 o'clock and I'll be like, Arden, listen, if you just changed your pump before you went to bed, you'd be great. But if you go to bed with this pump, like at 8 a.m., it's going to need to be changed one way or the other. And so, whether you're going to like sleep in or not. And I don't know, it's just the way you put it to me. Like, and I'm just sitting there looking at you, like at your age, having had diabetes for so long, you're like, oh, I ride those pumps right to the bitter end.
I did.
And I was like, oh, okay, well, then that's a thing I won't talk to her about anymore. Because that to me felt like a piece of this I can't understand anymore. Do you know what I mean? So,
yes. Yeah. And I think that's, would it be wise to change it before the last 10 units? Because, all those
let
things
me be clear,
I totally
Erica.
agree.
I'm 100% right. Yeah, but I'm not factoring in the other part of it, which is she lives with it. Mm-hmm. Actually, I used your experience as a proxy to fill in a gap in my thinking about Arden, and that helped me a lot. I don't know. I never
I'm
told
so
you
glad.
that. Yeah. So.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm glad I normalized my procrastination behavior.
I don't know.
But there's something about you don't want to, it's not even about wasting the insulin, although that might be a little bit. It's just about, why do it now when I still have got time? And I can do it tomorrow morning. I don't know. It's a weird,
I have come to think of it
thing.
as her trying to create as much time between touching diabetes as possible. That's kind of how I've come to think of it when I'm trying to like help her. So
yes,
yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So we went off tangent, but that's okay. Hopefully that normalized some of that for y'all.
Yeah, I hope so.
So in the kind of noticing this chatter around trying to face social interactions, if you're also feeling like, gosh, I can't, like, as you already said, Scott, I can't trust anyone. And maybe that is the actual reality that you have. There's no family, there's no real reliable source of caregiving other than yourself. And so I want to honor that. And is there something beneath that of, what if I'll never forgive myself if something happens, like they go high for while I'm gone, or they go too low, and again, those are real fears. I don't want to minimize those. But is shame preventing you from taking some opportunity to take care of yourself?
Yeah. Like there's like a middle ground, because we all have friends who are just like, whatever, it's fine. They go on vacation, they don't take their kids with them, and you're like, oh my God. Like, and they're like, no, it's nice for us to get we get away on our own. I'm like, oh, I would never do that. But you guys seem fine. You know what I mean? Like, so you have this like held belief about like, no one's going to, in this example, no one's going to be able to do this. They're going to mess it up. I'm just not going to go out. I'll stay here. And then the family across the street with diabetes is, I don't know, on a 3-day bender and the kid's fine. I wish everybody could come to the middle a little bit. And I do think that happens because there are people who just have a freedom about them that are just, it's just like everything's going to be all right. And I'm like, okay. I said to the Arden the other day, I think I have that, but my wife doesn't. So we blend ourselves to the middle, which is kind of nice, actually.
Yes.
The Arden was saying something the other day and I texted her 3 Little Birds and she's like, what? And I was like, you don't know that song? And she's like, what? I'm like, every little thing's going to be all right. And she's like, whatever. So, but I think everything's going to be all right. I wouldn't drift a 3-day bender, but I would drift a little far to that side. My wife pulls me back a little bit and I anchor her from being too, oh God, let's never go out again because this isn't going to be okay. So, I don't know. Yeah. But what if everybody's thinking one way or the other and nobody's there to pull you back to the center, I guess. I'm sorry. I'm talking a lot today.
It's good.
It's Friday.
It's good. Okay, so as we talk about going into social experiences, we talk about the burden of explanation, what you already referenced in the beginning. What do you do when people either they think they're, asking compassionate questions, but they might land as more, ignorant, or even though they're really trying not to be.
God only gave it to them because they knew you could handle it.
Yeah.
No one's ever said that to me where the little voice in my head hasn't gone, you, just so you all know. And I know you meant well by it. And I never said it out loud, but it never feels good.
Yes. Yeah. And those are people like, right, they're trying to offer encouragement and they're trying to affirm your strength. But gosh, it just doesn't land right. So having something prepared, it feels maybe inauthentic, but in that moment when you're feeling extra fragile and vulnerable and but you also need to be out in the world or need to interact with your child's teacher or other parent in the classroom, to have something practiced, like, thanks for checking in. It turns out type 1 is way scarier. It's way more complicated than I ever knew. And then usually people might say, or you could even say, if they're saying like, how are you doing? Like, looks like Teddy's doing great. And if you aren't quite ready to say anything, to say, you know what, he's doing okay. I'm not really ready to process or share. And then oftentimes people say, how can I help? And then we're going to get into some tools, right? Because then we feel stuck. What do we want to say there?
I'm glad you bring that up because that sounds healthier than what I do. So I'm Madagascar penguin, the whole thing. I don't know if your kids are old enough to have watched the movie Madagascar. Probably
no.
Not. There's 3 penguins and they're constantly up to mischief. And when they get caught, the one that's in charge goes, just smile and wave, boys. Just smile and wave. And that's what I do. I do it to endos. I do it to everybody. I'm like, oh yeah, everything's great. Oh, we'll change that right now. Don't worry. Ha ha. When people are, how's it going? I go away in my head.
Yeah.
I don't want to think about the last 20 years of diabetes when you ask me the question. So I go, she's doing great. Thanks for asking. And generally speaking, by the way, that's true. But the nuance around it, I think the nuance isn't worth sharing in that moment, but I like the way you were talking about it. Like, hey, it turns out this is harder than I thought it was. Like maybe be honest. Anyway, keep going. I thought that was wonderful. I don't know why I cut you off.
Yeah, and that's good because it matters who the audience is, right?
Sure.
We don't have to. I think that this burden of feeling like, do I need to educate? Do I need to explain to them how hard it is, even though you're inside, you might be just like barely hanging on. And then when someone says, looks like you're doing okay, or he's back in class, or he's playing sports, way to go. And you're inside just feeling like, oh my gosh, this woman has no idea how hard this is.
Yeah.
You get to then make that choice, right? You can be like, oh, everything's great, or we're doing okay. Or to say, you can do a little, does it feel like you want to do a little bit of education, right? To say, gosh, type 1, it turns out I had no idea what it was before he was diagnosed, but it's way more complicated and way more serious than I ever knew. But I'm not really ready to like share everything quite yet, but thanks for asking. And as human beings, typically they want to help.
Right.
And so I often hear when I'm like role playing with caregivers in this, people then say, well, how can I help? And it's hard to say, well, you can't drop off a casserole, right? Or maybe you could, I don't know,
right.
But that's complicated,
How can I help? Can I have your pancreas?
Right. So it's like having these resources and mantras planned and prepared, just as we did. Like I remember in the teen session at the conference that we just were at the Touched by Type 1, I asked them, what do you say when people ask you what's on your arm? Because in the beginning, you might not be prepared. And a lot of them had prepared things like, oh, I'm part robot, or, oh, it's my CGM. What's a CGM? Oh, ask your parent. It's complicated.
Yeah.
All these prepared things to protect you, to not have to go as deep as you want to, right, in those moments.
Right. Arden was asked once if she had cancer because Insulet makes Omnipod for insulin delivery, but they also make a medication. They make a pod that delivers medication that you get after chemotherapy that helps.
I have been asked that. I was asked, are you either post chemo or something along with cancer? Yes. Yeah. Actually, I forgot about that. So you just brought that up.
I can't forget because my mom called me one day and she goes, I'm wearing Arden's pump today. And she was like, I think she felt like a kinship. It was nice. I think she felt excited by it. Yeah. You're going to get asked any number of crazy things. Is that a nicotine patch? Is it this? Is it that? Like, and
yes. Or with the pump, I used to get, are you on call?
Oh, really? Because it was like on your waist?
Like a pager. Yeah. It looked like, it still kind of looks like a pager, but I don't think
Erica,
people
don't forget,
anymore.
You look young because I'm here and I'm old, but don't say stuff like that because
I'm old. It's okay. So what do you do when they say, how can I help? You've navigated that awkward, either, ignorant question, and you've shared what feels appropriate to you given the audience. And then to have some things ready. And a lot of you guys probably know some of these resources already, but I think it's good to hold them here. I actually share this episode with a lot of my clients, the best of Juicebox explaining type 1, number 836. It's you and Jenny, it's just a 1 hour explanation of what it is. And it's good for coaches, teachers, family. So I think you might have other specific episodes.
It might actually be part of the pro tip series too.
Oh, it's not a best of Juicebox. It might be pro tip.
I think I think it, you've caught me. I put it out.
Both.
Yeah. I put it out as an episode. I think isn't that interesting? Let me take a look. I think it's part of the explaining type 1. Yes. So you can find it as part of the pro tip series at 1019. It ran as a best of episode at 836. And I think it initially ran, and that came from the community.
Yeah.
The community asked for like, I'm so tired. Actually, you're reminding me about this. I'm so tired of explaining this to people. I wish I had something to hand them. And Jenny and I were like, well, we could make something that you could hand them. And then that's what we did. So,
And it's a great, easy, you email it out to friends. I email it to clients a lot to have them share it, because it is a real part of this transition, this burden of interacting with people, family, friends. A lot of you guys already have, whether it's 504s, a T1D, one sheet. They're great resources. Touched by Type 1 has already, a PDF letter to the teacher. They also have the Type 1 at school. American Diabetes Association has great, the Safe at School resources. So these are things you probably already know, but if not, there's a lot of things out there already created for you for the coaches, teachers, family, caregivers. Another great resource from behavioraldiabetes.org are these etiquette cards. I don't know if you've seen these before, Scott. You can print them out as a PDF, or you can buy them from their website and they fold up to like the size of a business card. Now, ironically, they have two different types of cards. One is for, people who don't have diabetes, and the other one is for parents, like what your teen would like you to know.
Okay.
But it would be great, right, if there was one for caregivers to be able to hand out. But they highlight things that are challenging and to talk about with your teens, and then also with family members. And so I just wanted to share that from behavioraldiabetes.org.
I'm happy to steal that idea. What your teens would like to know would be a good podcast episode, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I just looked while you were going over that. That episode in the last month, the Explaining Type 1, has been downloaded 1,000 times in the last month. So people really must share it more. I didn't realize how much it was being downloaded. I mean, and I say that because it's been out for years. And in the last 30 days, 1,000 times is a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a lot. Yes. No, that's a good idea. Yeah. We could just even go through those topics, because there's often like we have a lot of these feelings and tensions, but then when they're put to words, it feels just so validating. And yes.
Can I ask you a question it's going to ask you to suppose a little bit? But for the people who are burdened by these burdens, obviously this is completely real. Do you think there's anyone that listens that just goes, this never happened to me? Like, I don't feel this way at all. Like, do you think that's possible, like just personality wise, or do you think they're lying to themselves to some degree, or do you think there could be a mix of that?
I think there probably is a mix. So supposing a caregiver, their child's diagnosed and they are able to go out into the world and interact and don't feel that burden of how do I explain, how do I manage my own emotions as I'm explaining what it is? Possibly. And maybe that's someone who's highly self-aware, who's grieved and feels like their grief is contained. Maybe they've gone through a lot. Perhaps they're highly resilient and they feel like, we've gone through X, Y, and Z. We can manage this. Maybe there's an oversharing, like we've talked about before. Like maybe you're grieving and emotions are coming out to anyone and everyone who will listen.
Oh, we've all had a friend get broken up with, and then it just all comes. And you're like, oh, please stop sharing all this with me. It's too much.
Yes.
Please stop. Listen, I said it because I think I was probably a mix. Like I was handling it, but I also think there were impacts that I was pretending didn't exist as well. And now getting to make the podcast, I can look backwards and see them more easily.
Yes. Yeah. Like in the moment, perhaps it might feel like you're processing and interacting with the world in a really healthy way. And that might be true. And hopefully that is true. But maybe upon reflection, looking back and thinking, well, maybe I was holding everything in and pretending, doing as you were saying, like, everything's great, thanks. And then you're going home and just into a puddle.
Just smile and wave, boys. Just smile and wave. That's the line from the movie.
Yes.
I also find it's valuable to just assume I'm always making mistakes. And that way, I just don't know what they are at the moment. Because sometimes you are and sometimes you're not. But if you always think you're right, you're never going to be able to look back and self-adjust and, maybe, I don't know, learn from it, move on. So I try my hardest, That doesn't always work.
That is the complication or the duality and pain of that burden of smiling and waving. Does that feel easier in the moment? But then do you end up feeling isolated and alone and feeling like people don't get it?
Yeah.
But then it also feels exhausting.
Right.
Have to say, gosh, this is really hard. Listen to how hard it is.
It could feel easier in the moment, but I definitely think it does damage. Like, the only time you're going to get away with that is when you get so old. Like, I'm so looking forward to this part in my life when you're just like, there's nothing left. This is who I am. Let's just ride it out. Like, I can't wait to get to that one. But until then, you're growing, hopefully. So, But I am excited to get to that point where I could just be like, listen, I want to let you all know this is as good as it's going to get. And I'm going to stop worrying about it now. But that day's not today, Erica. So got to keep going a little longer, I guess. Did I cut you off before you got to the babysitter list? I apologize.
Yeah. So the last thing, a lot of you guys might know this too, from Type 1 Together, there's a babysitter list that they've created that you can go look and type in your zip code and see if there are any Type 1s who have registered as babysitters. in your area. So I think that's just a nice resource to have from them, from Type 1 Together. That definitely eases the burden of explaining what Type 1 is, right? Because they're living it, but then there still is, the conversation around how much do you want them to treat, not treat, all those things, like how personal, you have to have the personal Type 1 management conversation, but not this is Type 1 diabetes conversation.
And that's Raquel, by the way. She's been on the show, Type 1 Together.
Yes. And she started as a babysitter and then created this whole thing.
And once drove me to an airport, which is a piece of, I don't think anybody knew that, but I gave a talk somewhere when it was at the beginning of Uber. And I was like, I'm not getting in someone else's car. Like, that's not happening. And Raquel was like, I'll take you. And I was like, okay, that I'll accept. You look like somebody I can hold accountable. So
nice.
Yeah. Anyway, she's lovely.
Before that was the beginning of Uber. That's just you just dated yourself now.
Listen, I'm very old. That's neither here nor there. I'm getting by, Erica, on having dark hair. Really, it's the only thing saving me at this point. But no, I mean, it was ride shares were new. And I was like, I'm not calling a stranger who couldn't get a job with a taxi company to come pick me up in their Corolla. I'm not doing it. And I was really adamant about it, just in case you're wondering. I was like, I'll walk.
Do you take Ubers now?
Now I do.
Or Lyfts? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I care less about
over that.
I care less about my life now. So, no, I mean, I do now. But it's a little more of a sanctioned,
yes.
thing.
It has been normalized.
Yeah. In the end, I'm an adult and I would like to be in my own car. But if I can't be, then I will do that. Is that an old person thing? Like, I want to be in my own car.
I don't know if that's an old person thing. That might just be a human being thing. I don't know.
Young people don't seem to care about anything, Erica. They're just like, whatever. It's fine. All right. We did good? We're good?
Yes, I think we are good. And that also that it, with the navigating the social experiences and gatherings, you will grow and evolve, and that those pain points that we discussed, hopefully will lighten.
Yeah. No, I spoke with a person today. I record sometimes more than once a day, and she's in her 70s. She has Type 1 diabetes. And she was making this point. She just said, it's not like when you break your arm and you just forget about it. And I thought, she's been alive so long that she broke her arm at some point and doesn't think about it anymore. Like, if you're 8, you're like, I broke my arm last summer, and that idea that eventually just keep going and you don't remember. I'll tell my kids if they're arguing or something, I'll say, listen to me, a year from now, you won't remember this. And that's an indicator of how maybe unimportant this moment is. Like, and not that in this moment, you're not having a real disagreement or something's not happening, but you don't have to judge it as if it's going to be with you every day for the rest of your life, because sometimes you make that a self-fulfilling prophecy,
Yes. To give it perspective is so important.
Anyway. All right. I'm out of gum store wisdom for today, Erica. We have to go. Gum store? Candy? Okay. What's the saying? Dime store wisdom, right?
Who's going to find it first?
I'm using the internet. What are you doing? Is that the saying? Dime store wisdom, like a little kernel of truth you pick at in the unluckiest places. I don't know. Oh, and then in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Was that this episode or no?
That was this episode.
Okay, hold on a second. Erica and I, we sometimes record more than one episode in a sitting. He's trying to tell his wife that he has value, but he uses a word, and now I can't think of what it is. Let's see. George Clooney tries to convince his estranged wife, Penny, of his worth. She has doubts, especially with his slick talk and past mistakes. So he defends himself by saying, I'm the damn paterfamilias, basically declaring that he has value because he's the man of the family, even if he's flawed. And she replies with a deadpan that he's not bona fide. That's what I was thinking about. I don't know why. Like, I'm sorry. It's the end of the day. Anyway, see it in context. You'll love it. Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou? I don't know what year it was made, but you should be able to find it. All right, now we're going to go.
Okay.
So,
okay.
See you. I'd like to thank the blood glucose meter that my daughter carries, the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. Learn more and get started today at contournext.com/juicebox. Prolonged hyperglycemia can lead to serious health problems and long-term complications. Learn more at medtronicdiabetes.com/hyper. This episode of the podcast was sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes. Are you starting to see patterns, but you can't quite make sense of them? You're like, oh, if I bolus here, this happens, but I don't know what to do. Should I put in a little less, a little more? If you're starting to have those thoughts, if you're starting to think, this isn't going the way the doctor said it would, I think I see something here, but I can't be sure. Once you're having those thoughts, you're ready for the Diabetes Pro Tip series from the Juicebox Podcast. It begins at episode 1000. You can also find it at juiceboxpodcast.com up in the menu. And you can find a list in the private Facebook group. Just check right under the featured tab at the top. It'll show you lists of a ton of stuff, including the Pro Tip series, which runs from episode 1000 to 1025. I can't thank you enough for listening. Please make sure you're subscribed or following in your audio app. I'll be back tomorrow with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com. And one more time, if you're enjoying the podcast, please make sure that you're subscribed or following in the audio app that you're listening in right now. If you're listening online, go find one of those free audio apps and subscribe. And if you're enjoying the show, please share it with someone else who you think might also enjoy it.